scientifically objective is definitely entirely based on observable data and reproducible results. And if there's something you don't know, you have to just stop there and don't know and carry on, keep working, find new ways to ask the questions. Philosophically objective is sort of a majority rules kind of thing, where if enough of us agree that murder is wrong, then we'll all believe that murder is wrong.
Hmm.
But it still happens.
Hmm.
I don't think there are many people in this country who would actually stand up in public and say, I think murder is fine, let's do it. But it still happens.
Hmm.
Um, so, sort of trying to work through things with an objective mindset, I feel like that's a somewhat better starting place than being entirely subjective. It's almost related to, it's sort of a big picture external version of that mindfulness practice of not overreacting to your emotions.
Mm.
If you become too subjective in a larger societal way, um, you get you can get a lot of chaos and anarchy, or very, very deep rooted divisions like we have now.
Mm.
That's something over the past few years I've thought a lot about, that there are people on both sides of an argument who are so far apart that they don't even seem to be arguing about the same thing.
Hmm.
And that's a philosophical question that I have no idea how to answer.
Yeah, I was hoping you did because I don't either. But it's like, to me, what I come back to in that is, from my personal philosophy on life, is it comes back to like a sense of responsibility for each of us
Hmm. Hmm.
to acknowledge that fact, as you just said, that there is no true objectivity, right? Some people want to believe in objectivity. For some people, God is objective, right? Religion, God,
Hmm.
spirituality, that is the objective, right? And that's, they follow that. And I think there's value in that, but there's also danger, because as soon as
Hmm.
you accept something to be completely true that you can't necessarily verify, you can be manipulated and spun a lot of different ways, right? So
Hmm.
then the other side of that spectrum is too subjective. Just everything's up to anybody. It doesn't matter, right? Nihilistic almost.
Hmm.
To me, it's like you have to you have to acknowledge the fact that we can't have objectivity, but we want to strive towards it. So we have to constantly be questioning and checking. And if we raise our hands and all of us say murder is not okay, okay, great, then that's what we're going with. But nothing's written in stone, right?
Hmm.
Maybe 100 years from
Hmm.
now or whatever, we have to constantly be revisiting these things and looking at them, not because we want people to go start murdering
Hmm.
people, but
Hmm.
because we're trying to get to the best possible outcome. And the only
Hmm.
way you do that is by everybody individually questioning, challenging, trying to get more acceptance and control over themselves in those
Hmm.
situations. Easier said than done, but to me, that's the best
Yeah,
way.
yeah. And for me, that's where I go back to my sort of science-minded approach to life. And in science, if you are presented with new information and new data that gives you new results for your experiment, you have to accept that the results are what they are. And I think if we do that with our laws, with our customs, with our approach to society, with our interactions with other people, get comfortable with that constant change that's going to happen. Try to work toward your goals that you would like. If you, uh, I don't know how to change people's minds.
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
um, we can pass laws. We passed laws about civil rights 50, 60 years ago, but people are still racist.
Mhm.
I don't know how to change that other than trying to live a good example myself.
Would you say, Sean, that, like, because what it makes me think of is, you're right, right? We need to be willing to question and change in that very scientific approach you said. But I think where it's most difficult, and I think to stick with the science theme, you familiar with Richard Feynman? Have you heard of him,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
physicist? Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think he said this quote of like, the easiest person to deceive is yourself. And
Yeah.
to me, it comes back to that, right? That monster we were
Uh-huh.
talking about before, those moments where the anger gets the better of you, or the depression or whatever, it
Hmm.
feels so true and right. Like, this is the right reaction. To
Hmm.
me, that's the biggest thing to question. And the hardest thing is to actually question yourself. So take racism as an example of it. Like,
Hmm.
I'd have to imagine in that person's head, it's much like me when I punch a hole in the wall because I lost a video game when I was, 19 or whatever. In that moment, it feels like,
Hmm.
yeah, this is the right thing to do. I'm okay in
Yeah.
this. I'm still a
Hmm.
good person. This is all good. Something happened that allowed this to be okay. And it's that questioning of that like really hard, difficult, vulnerable questioning of like, maybe I'm not as good of a person as I thought I am. Maybe I
Hmm.
am racist. Maybe
Hmm.
it's not okay that I say this thing or make that joke or have this viewpoint. That's like, to me, that's what can't be understated. How hard it is to actually challenge your own deeply held beliefs. We all know it and we say it, like you should do that. But to do it is kind of the journey you've been on. To challenge those beliefs about those coping mechanisms, that's kind of it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say a big part of that process for me was going through kind of a method of taking the judgments I made about myself and re-examining those judgments
Mm,
in the moment of saying, not only saying like being able to say, okay, the reaction I had to that wasn't ideal, but also to say then the follow-up judgment I made about myself
mm,
was wasn't good.
mm,
Um, and kind of hand in hand with that, I've spent a lot of time, and I continue to. This is one of the hardest things for me, was to separate my internal self from the external world.
mm.
That those the judgments that I was making about myself, is that really me making those judgments, or is that the world around me making me think that? And that's a constant battle to
And
do
again, you
that.
never really know for sure. Like you're in
No,
some ways, yeah.
yes, in some ways you never know for sure.